What's up, everybody? This is Frank from Fam Sports New York, and for this video we're going to be previewing the teams for Section 1C, D, and the Hudson Valley Football League. And if you're new here, guys, we're going to be kind of doing a brief overview of all the teams, my thoughts on them, some of the players to look out for, and I've had a bunch of conversation with the coaches. I'm very excited to go over this with you. Quick disclosure though, if I don't talk about you, that doesn't mean I don't think you're a good football player, not going to have a big year. Again, limited in time. These are conversations I've had with the coaches and stuff, and this is my opinion. So I really do appreciate you guys for tuning in. Obviously, give that thumbs up and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Now let's dive into the teams, and starting with C and D. I think both these, I think C and D are going to be very competitive. I really like the competition this year between them. Now I know about Blindbrook leaving. I spoke a little bit about them in my last video for Class B. So I definitely hope that they can merge with Hastings. I think that would be so important for those kids, and it's terrible to hear about a program shutting down due to numbers. So hate that, but let's start it off, and let's start with Bronxville. I think Bronxville could be very competitive this year. Last year was a struggle. They were 1-8. They're coming back down to C. They're bringing back some talent with them, right? So 6 of 11 starters on offense are coming back. 4 out of 5 on the offensive line. They're bringing back their quarterback and Connor Kenny. And Coach emphasized this offensive line is big. They want to emphasize running the football, being physical, and they got the guys to do that. Defensively, 5 out of 11 starters are coming back. Some of those players to watch: Alex Kratowski, the big senior offensive lineman, defensive line, 6'6". He's a Super 11 player. He's a Frank's finest player. Really impressed with his growth as a guy who has good feet. He's gotten stronger, can bury people. Matthew McSherry is another one on a defensive tackle spot, offensive line spot. He could really break out this year. He's another 6'2", 270. Big boy, strong. If he can work on some of his technique, could be deadly. Another guy at the defensive end and also running back, Gabe Mycon, the senior, another physical, strong dude. I really like, again, his ability to attack downhill at defensive end spot, take on blockers. He was also very disruptive. Davis Peterson is another one Coach really raved about as a junior. Loved his work in the offseason and in the summer. Charlie Donahue is another guy, running back and cornerback, solid size kid to him, athletic. He's going to be such an important two-way player for this team. Alex Napolitano is a JV player. Coach really raved about him, as well as a young guy who's been impressive throughout the process. And their linebacker, Villanueva, bringing another defensive starter back in here is going to, again, be so important. They're playing against a very competitive league. It's not going to be easy, but I do think Bronxville is going to be near the top when the season comes to an end, right? So, again, it's going to be very competitive this year. I like Bronxville's chances. Let's talk about another team, though, team that won C last year, which is Westlake. Coached by Coach Castellano. They were 8-3. They won versus Dobbs Ferry in the section title game. They're also bringing back some talent, guys, and some experience. 5-11 starters on the offense, 2 out of 5 on the offensive line, bringing back the quarterback and Michael Pagan. And Coach talked about balance. That was a big emphasis on the offense. He wants to be more balanced. That was the emphasis to me. Defensively, they're bringing back a lot of experience. 7 of 11 starters, 3 out of the 4 as defensive backs could be a very strong unit for them. 2 out of the 4 are the linebackers, 2 defensive linemen. So they're bringing back talent at each level, and they really want to improve on the pass rush. Now, players to watch, again, this is a bunch of guys that we've seen already in the Frank's finest. Westlake is a very talented group, starting with Chris Calley, running back and defensive back. He had such a strong year last year, 16 touchdowns. He's going to be such an important two-way player, big play threat for them running the football. Nick Castellano, wide receiver and linebacker, another big play guy. Love his physicality, love his ability to go up and make plays on the football. Michael Pagan, their quarterback, Coach really raved. They love his, again, multi-year starter coming back. A guy who can hurt you throwing the ball. He can run the ball as well. Stephen Napoli, he was a Frank's finest defensive back, another running back, another strong two-way player for them. James Mealy up front, again, in the trench is going to be so important. You mentioned the size of Bronxville. James Mealy was a really strong player for them last year. He's going to be a junior. CJ Prosperino is another outside linebacker tight end, 6'1", 185, another guy who made some really nice plays on tape that I saw. Westlake is going to be there. Again, this is going to be another really strong test. Westlake has a chance to really repeat. Let's go to the next team, and that's Valhalla, coached by Coach Troilo. I did not get to speak with Coach, but they've had a couple really strong years now in a row, 6-3 last year. Some of the players that I watched on tape that I really liked: Rob Foysett, really strong running back. He's going to be an important two-way player for them. And I do think they have some guys up front that can help move blockers for him. And Rob Forset's a guy who constantly feels like he's getting positive yards. He also made some huge, big runs, bouncing off of dudes, showing good balance. Some of those linemen are really going to have to help him. Andrew Barabasi, another 6'2", physical, nasty player who wants to bury you. Ryan Chillo is another defensive lineman. He was really strong against the run, not very tall at 5'9", but 250 pounds. And Brendan O'Neill at the quarterback spot, right? They could have a nice combination of running back, quarterback. He also made some impressive plays throwing the football. He's going to be huge, but they have to replace some big-time wide receivers, so that's going to be a big test for them. All right, let's go to the next team, which is Dobbs Ferry. And coached by Coach Cox, this is another, Dobbs Ferry just feels like they're always there. They're always competing. Such a strong program in the C. 8-2 last year. They did lose to Westlake in the sectional. They're also bringing back a bunch of dudes, man. You know, offensively, 7 of 11 starters, 3 out of 5 on the offensive line. Bringing back the quarterback. Defensively, 7 of 11 starters coming back. So, I mean, Dobbs Ferry, they do lose guys like Dan. They've lost some important running backs, though. It's going to be hard to fill that void, but they're bringing back linemen. They're bringing back some guys in the secondary. The first one that starts with Drexel Lewis, who had such a big year as a defensive back, 12 INTs. Was a real superstar for them. Sawyer Shamaski on the linebacker spot and on the offensive line, one of their leading tacklers coming back. Leo Brunavis, offensive lineman, big, strong, physical. Not very tall, but stocky, can move bodies. Their quarterback, Kevin Hart, who made some big-time plays for them. Again, running some of that wing tee, running some option, doing some play-action passing. Going to be so important to utilize his legs this year. Is going to be so important. Jack Straub, the senior running back and defensive back, number 3. You got Elon Messier, the coach brought up. Really liked his offseason work. And Marty O'Leary, another guy on the defensive side of the ball and at the center spot. Frank's finest offensive center. He does a good job, but a lot of pull blocking going on. You got to be able to block backside, seal defenders off. It's going to be so important. Okay, let's go to the last team in C, and then we'll go to the D schools, and they're playing each other, right? So that's why we have them connected here. And then there are some jump balls with the Hudson Valley Football League. This is why I'm combining everybody here. But let's talk about Woodlands, right? And Woodlands had a tough year last year at 1-8. There are going to be some guys that are going to have to replace offensively. 3 out of 11 starters come back, 1 out of 5 on the offensive line. So a lot of new faces up front. They do also have to replace their quarterback, but they feel they have a strong core of athletes when I spoke to coach. And defensively, they bring back 4 of 11 starters. Preventing the big play was the emphasis. They're going to be playing a tough schedule. I mentioned very competitive here, so you got to figure things out really quickly. But a couple players to look out for. Jay Castillo. He was a pretty darn disruptive defensive end, outside linebacker off the edge for them last year. Jaden Roberts as a wide receiver and cornerback is going to be so important. Masai Campbell at the quarterback spot. Coach really liked the work that he put in. The junior. Muhammad Asfaya, offensive lineman and defensive lineman, the senior. Are going to be so important up front against these teams. We're bringing back a bunch of defensive linemen, a bunch of physical players. Can you win up front is going to be huge. Ethan Locke, the junior, is a running back and linebacker. Coach mentioned him on loving the work that he did. And Jameson Stevens, defensive lineman and tight end. These are going to be important players for Woodlands to be competitive in a super competitive league. These guys are going to have to step up. All right, guys, now let's go to Class D. And let's start off with Tuckahoe, coached by John Diarco. Such a strong year they've had again. I thought these D teams were so competitive, and Tuckahoe was leading the way. 9-1 last year. They were section champs, bringing back 7 of 11 starters, 4 out of 5 on the offensive line. This could be a team that is very physical up front, has some good depth up front. They would have to replace their quarterback Annunziata. That was so good to them. But they're going to have to rely on those guys in the trenches. And also the running back spot is going to be huge. Defensively, 6 out of 11, bringing, again, a nuclear core of defensive linemen, outside linebacker, and defensive back. It's going to be so important, but solidifying that running back wide receivers is going to be so important. Now, their quarterback, who's been their 4-year starter at safety, Colachicho, and I apologize again if I butcher any names, so please bear with me, but he was a fantastic, he's been a 4-year safety for them. He's been a backup quarterback who probably, and Coach mentioned this, he probably started on a bunch of teams while he was a backup. But he's going to be so important. This could be a year where he really helps carry the load here, and this is his time, right? Another guy he can rely on is their wide receiver and outside linebacker, Connor Benke, who was kind of an unsung hero for this team last year. But to me, it's going to start up front, right? They like the depth up front. Anthony Bartolini on the defensive line and offensive line. Chris Bartolini, strong nose tackle and offensive lineman. And Thaddeus Serlo. He's probably one of the most disruptive pass rushers out of the small schools. So important for these guys up front to be dominant. For Tucko to get a chance to be, again, competitive like they were last year and win D again. Because the other D school in Haldane, I think, can also be very competitive. I think they're bringing back a bunch of talent, coached by McConville. 6-3 last year, bringing back 8 starters on the offensive line, 8 out of 11 starters on the offense, 4 out of 5 on the offensive line, and bringing back their quarterback. They want to be more explosive. That was the emphasis from coach. To me, defensively, 7 out of 11 starters coming back. Getting more pressure on the quarterback is going to be so important this season. And some of the players to look out for Haldane. Ryan Van Tassel, the quarterback, is the first one. He's my Frank's finest for this group of guys. The senior, every year I've seen him grow. Solid size to him. Another kid who could beat you with his arm and his legs. I'm excited to see the growth he takes again. Evan Gianchinta is one of the best players out of all the small schools. Running back and linebacker. It's kind of like that defensive end hybrid. He is a powerful man who can really shows great balance and just bounces off of guys. He's going to be very important for them. He's going to have to dominate this year. A couple linemen are going to be important. Dylan Rucker, the senior. Jack Hartman, the senior, again, in a league that's super competitive. Who can control the trenches is going to be so big. And then we have wide receiver and linebacker Mike Murray and wide receiver Faye. Going to be so important out on the edge. Ryan Van Tassel throwing the football, getting it to these guys, and Jay Thomas is another one. So got multiple guys that the coach has been impressed with. Can they be those reliable weapons that Ryan Van Tassel is looking for? We are going to find out, right? So that is C&D, guys. And now let's wrap it all up with the Hudson Valley Football League. And let's start with the champions from last year, which is Walter Panis, coached by Coach Bill Castro. Last year, I mentioned 8-2, had a really strong year going down to the Hudson Valley Football League, but they have to replace a bunch of guys. 3 out of 11 starters coming back on offense, 1 out of 5 on the offensive line, but they do bring back probably the best player in the Hudson Valley Football League and one of the most explosive players in this area in Carlucci, their quarterback. Defensively, 4 out of 11 starters are coming back. Coach really emphasized to me who is going to step up, who is going to be the leader for this team. So that's going to be a big thing on the defensive side of the ball. Who's going to lead this defense, right? Big news is Carlucci's going to be playing both ways, and I'm excited to see some of these other guys. So Travis Carlucci, super explosive. If you don't know about him, covered him before. Really important player. Going to play quarterback and safety. Nick Tetro. Coach really loved the work that he put in. He was a cornerback. He's moving to linebacker. Also plays wide receiver, the senior. Marcus Alvarez is another corner. I think defensive back-wise, they could be pretty strong. He's going to be somebody. And Hoyt Kenny is another guy on the defensive back end who's coming back. So defensive back-wise, I think they can be strong. I think they'd be pretty active. Daniel Leonard, again, is another returning starter on defense. So to me, there's a lot more question marks on the offensive side, especially up front. Defensively, they're bringing back some guys who can make some plays for you. So again, is it just going to be the Carlucci show? Let's hope not. They had some strong runners last year. Next team, let's talk about Spring Valley. And they were kind of the surprise team last year, had a really strong year, 6-3. They lost to Panis in the championship. They're replacing a bunch of guys on offense. 3 out of 11 starters coming back, 1 out of 5 on the offensive line. Have to replace their quarterback. They're kind of doing a two-headed monster at the quarterback spot. More veteran stuff on defense, though. 6 of 11 starters coming back. A couple guys to keep an eye on. The first one, to me, Carl Augusti, the senior. Kind of a do-it-all player. Wide receiver, cornerback, kicker, punter. He's a well-rounded player, 3-year player, very fast. Definitely keep an eye on him. Kevin Besolium, the quarterback, defensive back. They're kind of, again, he's a two-way player for them. The coach talked about the competition at the quarterback spot. Going to be super important. Anthony Mack up front is a young guy who can, again, you saw that raw potential here. He can make a big impact this year. Keep an eye on him. All right, let's go to the next one, which is Port Chester. And Port Chester, I think, could be very competitive in this league. 4-5 last year, bringing back 5 starters on offense, 5 starters on defense. Up front, 3 out of 5 coming back. Now, they do have to replace their quarterback, Colin Taylor, who was so good, one of the best players in the Hudson Valley Football League. But Coach talked about he loves the culture. I mean, that was a big emphasis to me from him, is building up that culture is going to be so huge. And Coach really likes where this team is right now. A couple guys to point out, defensive back and running back, John Desia. the senior. Pretty smooth athlete, probably one of their most smoothest. I thought he was a very consistent defensive back as well. Running back was a target on a bunch of pass plays. John Paletti, the junior, good size to him, 6'2". You have Mark Desaville, the junior, running back and safety. So they got some running backs that can make plays for you. Question is going to be, to me, up front, right? So you have 3 of the 5 coming back. Coach really emphasized this could be a strength to them. Jaden Barbo, the senior, is going to be really important, and Alejandro Velasquez. Both seniors, both going to be super important in the trenches for Port Chester to be competitive. These are guys who are really going to have to step up. Another team that's very interesting to me is Ramapo. Coached by Coach Bullock. Again, last year was a struggle at 2-7. They're trying to fix up the culture, build up the program again. And to me, they're going to have some speed, right? So Coach really emphasized they got some athletes with them. But they do have to place a bunch of guys. I mean, they have, I think it was 4 out of 11 starters coming back on offense. I think 5 or 6 on the defense. On the offensive line, 2 out of 5 is coming back. They do have to replace their quarterback. Last year, they had 4 quarterbacks that they played. I mean, that's not an ideal situation, but again, making the most of it. But it does feel he has a very strong wide receiver core this year. So some of the players to watch, Jaden Michelle, transfer from Middletown, good-sized kid at 6'1", 180 pounds, playing wide receiver, tight end, and outside linebacker. Fabrice Adelson, another wide receiver and defensive back, 2-way player for them. Keep an eye out for him. Gabe Montefleur, he was a Frank's finest safety, another very active defensive back for them. He's going to be another important 2-way player. To me, quarterback Cameron Von Allen, he brought up as another athletic kid who play wide receiver, play corner, play quarterback. Jose Perez at the running back spot, very strong, right? So these next 2 guys, Malachi Willis and Jose Perez at the running back and linebacker spots, are going to be so vital to this team. Again, figuring out things up front, they're going to have to run the football and be key cogs in the middle of that defense, because I think the secondary could be very strong. And a guy up front, Noel Noah, right? And the coach talked about, again, the guys up front is going to be vital if this team can make moves. It's going to be those guys up front, and he's going to help lead that charge. All right, next up is Tappan Zee. Tappan Zee is another team you don't hear a lot of, but this could be another team. Again, you talk about Walter Panis, you talk about Port Chester. This is another team in Tappan Zee that's bringing back some guys. Offensively, 5 of 11 starters are coming back. They were 5-5 last year, but 1 out of 5 on the offensive line. So figuring out the trenches is going to be huge. They are bringing back their quarterback, Kilheven. And defensively, 4 out of 11. Stopping the run was a big emphasis from Coach when I spoke with them. So they have 2 stud running backs last year, both gone, right? So again, I think they're going to be spreading the ball a little bit more. That's what Coach emphasized. Running the ball was so important to them last year. We're going to see which guys can fill those roles. To me, one of the guys, when I looked at tape, and Coach even mentioned him, that I really liked was Owen O'Hara, running back and linebacker and punter. He's a very active football player for them. He was another guy who's that 3rd running back who made plays on offense but didn't need defensively. He was very active. Jason Riley is another one, running back and linebacker and kicker. These 2 guys are going to help carry that load, I think, on the offense. Michael Martinez, the junior, is a wide receiver and corner, number 17. You also have Victor Bavona. The coach brought up another junior tight end and linebacker. On that offensive and defensive line, Cameron Keeperman, the junior, number 50, is going to be another guy. And then finally, a couple athletes and defensive backs. You're seeing a bunch of juniors here, right? So they're expecting a lot of big plays from these juniors coming up. Kevin Kukla, Tyan Murray. So Coach really brought up these guys. They like the work they put in, expecting huge roles for them this upcoming year. All right, guys, let's go to the last 2 teams. Next one is Peekskill, coached by Coach Gardner. They were 2-6 last year, but I thought they really improved as the season went along. And they're bringing back all 11 starters on offense and all 11 starters on defense. You normally don't have that, but when you have such a young team, now they're bringing back some experience here. And Coach was really, excited and talking about kind of the buy-in, right? The buy-in is going to be super important. Peekskill is another team that I thought, again, improving. You saw some of the wins at the end of the season. It's going to be huge going into this year. Players to watch out for them. The big one he emphasizes their big lineman, Andre Gonzalez, at 6'3", 315 pounds. Big-bodied kid, going to be huge, leading the charge up front. Also a skill guy, Armani Brown, a transfer from Stepan. Coach really raved about him, being a guy who can make big plays for them. I also want to shout out to Coach Garrity, who could be watching this on the offensive side. Offensive lineman, defensive end, Nazir Johnson, and moving to offensive line was an all-section wrestler for peak skill, and Darius Smith, running back. So these are some couple guys who can make some big plays for their team. It's going to be super important. Finally, Poughkeepsie is the last one in the Hudson Valley Football League. I don't really know much about them, right? I haven't really able to watch the tape. They don't have much tape. They have a new coach in Jaquan Floyd. So again, I hope Coach Floyd may be watching. Reach out to me, tell me about your team. But again, that's it, guys. That was C&D and the Hudson Valley Football League. Thank you guys so much for joining. I know it was a lot. I'm really excited for the football season. With that, I'm signing out.